College basketball stars will be All-Americans this season. Leif and I draft our top choices with some surprise dark horse names to keep an eye on.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Tuesday. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Andy Patton, joined today by the great Leif Thulin, and you are joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. I want to thank all of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day, and remind you that you can check out this show ad-free on Amazon Music. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is here, and you can visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. All right, folks, this is a very fun show here. This is something we've done the last couple of years. Either Leif and I, or Isaac and I, or Isaac and Leif have done this, where we just do an All-American draft. And the rules are pretty simple. We're each going to take turns drafting. We're each going to end up with 6 total players. And the goal is to draft as many AP All-Americans as possible. And at the end of the year, once the poll is out and we know who's going to make the All-American teams, we will count up our points here. You will get 5 points if you get the player of the year, 4 points if you get a player on the first team, 3 points for second team, 2 points for third team, and then 1 point if you are an All-American honorable mention. So that's it. Very simple, very fun. A lot of different ways we can go through this. And Leif, I am going to let you pick first, which I may regret, but I'm going to let you go first and kind of pick your top choice for All-American this upcoming college basketball season.
I don't think my top choice is going to be the conventional top choice.
Well, good. That should help me out.
my top choice is Darryn Peterson, because I think he's the best player in the country. So I'm going to I said I wasn't going to be clever. Wasn't going to try to outmaneuver, because there's a world in which I could get him with the third pick or something like that. And I had an alternative I'm really hoping comes to me at the third pick. But Darryn Peterson is going to score 20 plus a game, and I think that's going to be an All-American.
I think Darryn Peterson's probably as safe as a pick from like a freshman perspective as you're going to have this year. I mean, Cooper Flagg would have been a safe pick last year, obviously, but for this year, there's probably 3 freshmen that are going to be in this conversation for All-Americans, and Peterson, to me, feels like the safest pick among the freshmen. But I'm going to go with what is probably the safest pick among all players in college basketball this upcoming season, the preseason projected player of the year by most media outlets, and that is Purdue guard Braden Smith. Of course, Braden Smith has been one of the most productive players in college basketball the last couple of years, and looks fully on track to do that again. This Purdue team is very loaded. They still have Lawyer. They still have Trey Kaufman-Renn, and they have some added talent. And I think Braden Smith's going to put up some huge numbers for the Boilermakers this season.
I mean, I love Braden Smith, no doubt about it. I think that he's likely to be first team. I think it's unlikely he's National Player of the Year, I guess is my logic as to why I went with Peterson. Now we go to pick 3. I got my wish. I got my number 3 guy. I thought about taking at 1 just so I would have a better chance getting one of those 2 that we just discussed. I'm going to go with Cam Boozer as the 3rd overall pick, because Cam Boozer, I think AJ shares more responsibility, and I know he's the flashier name, and he very well could be on this list as well. But Cam Boozer is going to put up numbers, and he's going to be on a team that I think is one of the top 5 teams in the country. And that recipe has worked very well for Duke guys. You look at Paolo Banchero, who's often compared to. You look at Cooper Flagg a year ago. And there's just not many players at Duke that carry the torch and they carry the scoring workload that don't become All-American. So I feel pretty confident Cam Boozer is going to be one.
Yeah, I like the Boozer pick as well. He was pretty high on my list. Again, for a lot of the reasons you just laid out. Duke freshmen on teams that do well are near slam dunks to be All-American picks. And I think Boozer, sliding up to playing the 4 as opposed to playing the 5, I think he's going to just absolutely dominate in that role. So I think that's a phenomenal pick here. And I'm also going with a big man, and we're kind of trading off here. You go with a young guard, I go with the older guard, you go with the young big. I'm going with an older big man in JT Toppin from Texas Tech. I just think a guy who's so productive, again, using that key word, was so productive last year for the Red Raiders. And I think this year, they lose Darion Williams. They bring in some very talented transfers, but who are kind of, in a lot of ways, kind of role players, guys like Tyree Bryan and Lawan Watts. Obviously, you and I are both very high on Christian Anderson and expect a big kind of pickup from him performance-wise this year, but ultimately Toppin is the anchor for this team. And I'm a firm believer that Texas Tech is a top 5 team in college basketball this year. And I think that we'll see that bear out. Grant McCaslin's a great coach. They have a great schedule. Their non-con actually just came out a few days ago. And I know Isaac's going to have a team preview for Texas Tech later this week, which will be fun to break down some big parts of this team. But JT Toppin is going to be one of the most prolific scorers in college basketball. He's going to be one of the best rebounders in college basketball. If he's putting up something around 18-9, which is probably on the lower end of a lot of the projections for him, that's going to be good enough for him to be an All-American, assuming Texas Tech doesn't completely struggle this entire season. So I'm going with Toppin here. I think he's a relatively safe pick. But what are your thoughts on Toppin as a pick here?
I like that pick. I was kind of hoping you wouldn't take him because that was going to be my next pick. But I think that Toppin's the most surefire big man to get. I think there's a couple other bigs that have a claim to have similar levels of double-doubles and everything. I just don't think the team will score as much as his team will, or it will be less centric on 2 players. Like, it's going to be Christian Anderson and JT Toppin. And those other guys are nice additions, like you said. But some of the other teams with prolific big men that score the ball, they've got other guys to feed. And I think that as much as I want it to be who's the best player, I think statistics really do matter in All-American chases. And so I think he's going to be a 20-10 guy, and there aren't going to be many of those.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, the projections from Bart Torvik have Toppin as the leading scorer in college basketball. I'm not sure that I buy that necessarily, but like amongst bigs, like you said, I'm sure we'll talk about some of these other bigs later in the show and guys who are very high usage players, but they tend to have more talent around them. And while Texas Tech has a lot of talent, Toppin is going to take on such a dynamic role for that team offensively. And I think that's going to be what puts him in the conversation as a first teamer, puts him in the conversation for player of the year, at least again, in that conversation. And I think a fairly safe bet to at least be on one of these teams when the season finishes up. Leif, that's 4 great players off the board. We got 8 more to go, and we're going to get into those picks coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, it's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. This grape, ginger, and lime flavored shot brings the iconic taste of a golf course favorite to a non-alcoholic boost. Perfect for sinking birdies or making great memories with your friends. It's a hole-in-one for your energy game. So whether you're out on the course or just need a little extra push to power through your day, 5 Hour Energy Transfusion delivers the clubhouse flavor you love without ever having to leave the green. I'm honestly not much of a golfer myself. I'm more of a mini golf guy, but I love going to the course with my buddies to drive the cart, hang out, and it's all just fun hanging out with your friends, and that's what golf is about. Good times with good people and good flavors. And the grape, ginger, lime flavor of 5 Hour Energy Transfusion gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without having to leave the course or chase down the beverage cart. Now you can amp up the fun even more. Just buy, snap, and enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip for 2 to any golf tournament in the USA. Tee up that trip. Visit 5hourenergywin.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. Executive excludes the Masters tournament. Ends October 31st, 2025. Well, folks, the NFL season is here, and FanDuel's making sure you're ready for kickoff with a cannot-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. One of the best things about FanDuel is that it fits however you like to bet, whether it's player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little bit of energy to those Sundays. Right now, the Packers 3.5-point favorites at home against the Commanders on Thursday Night Football this week. The money line is in favor of Green Bay at -194. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. All right, Leif, 4 picks down, 8 more to go between the two of us here as we are projecting our All-American picks for this upcoming season. As a reminder, Leif went with a pair of freshmen with his first 2 picks, Darryn Peterson at Kansas and Cam Boozer at Duke. I went with a couple more veteran guys, Braden Smith at Purdue and then JT Toppin at Texas Tech. Now Leif is up next for his 3rd pick. Leif, who do you got?
I'm really torn. I got one veteran that I think is going to be a pretty much lock, and then maybe I'll just round out the trifecta of freshmen. So I'll do it. I'll take AJ.
Yeah,
I think the hype train behind AJ is warranted. I think there's a world in which he's really, really good, and so is Richie Saunders on that team, and therefore neither should necessarily be first-team All-American because they're taken away from each other. But if that's the case, then AJ is going to get a nomination because he's the dude who's driving eyes to college basketball. So I'm going to go with AJ. I have a guy that I really, really hope you do not take. But I'm going to go with AJ, round out the freshman trio. Fun fact for you. The last time there were 3 freshmen in the All-American first team, it was 2018.
Okay.
And since then there's been 2 twice, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's possible. This is the best crop of 3 freshmen that I can remember in a while since the 2018. That was DeAndre Ayton, Marvin Bagley, and Trae Young.
Mm-hmm.
And they were rounded out by Jalen Brunson and Devontae Graham, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty stacked class. I think it's going to be similar to that in this regard. So I'll go with AJ.
I like that pick. I think 3 on the first team would be rare, like as you mentioned, but it's definitely possible. And even so, it's like, these 3 guys are probably going to be All-Americans, whether they're all on the first team, whether one of them's on the second team, even if one of them's on the third team. Like, you're still getting points for that. And I think that, the odds of Dybansa, I mean, he's going to contribute so much for this team. And Saunders maybe cancels out some of that, but Rob Wright's going to be delivering that ball to both those guys. And I think they're going to put up some big numbers. So I like that pick there. I'm probably going to stick with my guns on going with more veteran guys, just especially now that you've wiped out the 3 kind of most likely freshmen to be part of this conversation this year. I have a couple that I'm kind of trying to choose from. I was thinking about going with another big. There's a couple of bigs that I really like here, but I think I'm going to go with the guy that I expect to lead Kentucky in scoring this year, which I think should get him in this conversation, assuming Mark Pope's team is as good as I think they're going to be. And that's returner Otega Owe. He was 16 points per game-ish last year. A lot of projections have him 17, 18 points. I think there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen for Kentucky, but a lot of the guys that are on this roster are more kind of role players. Like Cam Williams is great. Jaden Quaintance, when he's healthy, is great, but those guys don't need like a ton of touches necessarily. I think Owe's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. I think how he gels with Jalen Lowe and Denzel Aberdeen is a really interesting question for me. And I think a big part of not only Owe's chances of being an All-American, but just this team's chances of being, a top 5, top 3 team in college basketball. But ultimately, we saw Owe be so good in a Mark Pope-led offense last year. It's hard for me to not think that'll happen again this year.
I like that pick because, like I said earlier, I think the teams that are going to be really good have a distinct advantage in this. Mm-hmm. And I think the Kentucky is going to have a really good chance to win the SEC, and he may win the SEC Player of the Year. Mm-hmm. And if the SEC is half as good as it was last year, the SEC Player of the Year is going to end up on on a All-American team, not necessarily the first team. But I like that pick. I wasn't actually leaning in that direction. I like that though. I will go with Trey Kaufman-Renn.
I was so close to taking him, but I was like, I bet.
Yeah, I got worried. That was who I was debating. Trey Kaufman-Renn scored 20 a game last year. They're going to have more mouths to feed than most. That's why I was a little reluctant why I chose AJ, just because of the reasons I listed. But the reason Braden Smith's so fantastic is he can have 6 points in a game and still be the best player on the floor. But the beneficiary, the primary beneficiary is Trey Kaufman-Renn. Mm-hmm. He catches that short roll. He's got a beautiful little soft floater in the middle. He's got jump hooks. He's got really good post moves, and he's an improved free throw shooter. They have Omer Meyer, who I think will take some scoring away from everyone just because he's fantastic. Fletcher Lawyer is going to score, and who else is going to contribute for Purdue? You never really quite know, but it's going to be enough scoring. Like, I think this team can score 90 a game, and if they score 90 a game, I think he's still around 20 points and 8 rebounds, and that's first team All-American caliber to me.
Yeah, Trey Kaufman-Renn's a very logical pick here. I think you nailed it with, like, Braden Smith is not a score first point guard. He's a very good scorer. He's not quite like the Ryan Nembhard level where, on any given night, Ryan might get more assists than points. Braden is going to still get his 15 or so per game, but he's also so good at distributing the ball, at making sure his, whether it's getting Fletcher open for a 3 or getting Trey Kaufman-Renn the ball. And that Purdue offense just loves to funnel the ball through the bigs. And obviously Kaufman-Renn's not remotely similar player to Zach Edey in terms of size and gravity, but he's a very, very dynamic scorer, good touch around the rim, can bring the ball out a little bit. And I think, they got some talent in. They got Clough coming over from South Dakota State. They got Mayer coming in, like you mentioned. But I think that big 3 trio of Smith, Lawyer, and Kaufman-Renn are going to be the straw that stirs the drink for this team. And Lawyer, great player, obviously, but I think he's kind of clearly that third guy, that role player, 3-point shooter type. And I think Smith and Kaufman-Renn are going to be one of the best dynamic kind of 1-2 duos in all of college basketball. And I wouldn't be surprised at all, assuming Purdue finishes where I think they're going to finish, which is, 1 or 2 in the Big Ten and top 5, 10 in all of college basketball. If they do that, those two guys should probably both be All-Americans. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen at all. All right, let's see. Who do I want to go with here? A couple different options that I'm looking at. I'm thinking I'm a lot of guys in the Big Ten that I'm liking here in this spot as well. Also a guy in the Big 12 that I really like, but I think I can maybe get him a little bit later. I'm trying to kind of game the system based on what I know about you and where I think you might go with some of your picks. But I'm going to go with the big here. Not a big in the Big Ten, actually a big in the Big East. One of my favorite players, a guy that I've talked about quite a bit over the last couple of years, and that's Zuby Ejiofor over at St. John's. Rick Pitino has done some phenomenal stuff, obviously, with the Johnnies the last couple of years. We're not a surprise. Year 2, Rick Pitino last year was everything we thought it would be until we got into the NCAA tournament. And then unfortunately for Johnny's fans, that did not go so well as RJ Lewis had that really bad game against Arkansas. But Zuby is an absolute monster down low. I think that the talent around him on this team is going to help him have even more production, have even better season, because they have Bryce Hopkins and Dylan Mitchell. And I think both those guys are dynamic players who can handle the ball away from the rim a little bit. And I think that gives Zuby some more room to operate. They're a better 3-point shooting team than they've been in the past by bringing in guys who can space the floor a little bit. Sonone coming over from Arizona State, Sellers coming over from Stanford. So I think that Zuby's going to have a lot of room to operate down low. He's a menace on the glass offensively and defensively. I think this is a year where, like, he's already broken out. Don't get me wrong. It's not like he needs to break out even more, but I think you're going to see him have a phenomenal season. And for me, Toppin, Kaufman, Wren, Ejiofor, and then a few other guys I won't name yet. Like, they're some of the best bigs in college basketball. And every year, dominant low post bigs who put up, numbers approaching 20 and 10, they're pretty clear cut, easy to choose All-Americans. And I feel like, especially if they're on a good team, and I feel like that combination of things combined with what I think is going to be a very good St. John's teams puts Zuby in the conversation as an All-American.
I wasn't expecting that, and then as soon as you said, it's someone I'm high on, I was like, I know exactly who this is going to be. I'm going to take a guy that you know well, actually. I'm going to go with Graham Ike.
Yeah.
Because for the same reason. Gonzaga, they have not been as good as they have been the last 2 years, have been down years per Gonzaga's illustrious standards. Mm-hmm. But I'm expecting him to be 19-9. Mm-hmm. Like that's usually pretty close to All-American standard. Ike, to me, is a terrible defender. I'm just going to say it how it is. Mm-hmm. And I think there's bigs that are more impactful than Graham Ike. I think Zuby is a better player than Graham Ike. But I think there are a few teams that funnel the ball in as well to their bigs, Purdue being one of them, and Texas Tech being the other, just because I think Toppin's better than Ike. But I think very few teams get the ball inside to a big like Gonzaga does. And when they have a workhorse big, they score the ball. And typically that guy's All-American caliber. You can look at guys, and even Philip Petrusev, who like somehow in Gonzaga lore is like, hey, this guy stunk because he preceded Timmy. Like, he won the WCC Player of the Year. Right. He was fairly young. Yeah. And like that guy was like an All-American caliber player. So I think Petrusev's better than Ike. But all that said, I think Ike is going to be one of the best 4 bigs, best 5 bigs in college basketball. So I feel pretty confident he'll be an All-American of some sort.
Yeah, the Gonzaga, the Graham Ike conversation is going to be interesting this year because he's going to play alongside Braden Huff more this year. They were for the first 2 years that they were teammates, they were trading in and out for each other pretty much exclusively. They rarely played together when Gonzaga had Ben Gregg and Anton Watson, and then last year they also had Michael Ajayi. But this year they're going to start next to each other, and I think that should help in a lot of ways. But I do wonder. I mean, Braden Huff's a great scorer around the rim. It's like 70%, right around the basket. So it's like you can't have both those guys clogging it up down there. So I do wonder how that's exactly going to work, if it's going to be matchup dependent. But there's zero doubt in my mind that Graham Ike is going to have the ball in his hands a whole bunch this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he approaches 18, 19 points per game. And again, if Gonzaga's a top 25, top 20 team, if Graham's averaging over 18 points a game, he's absolutely in that All-American conversation. So I really like that pick there as well. I'm very interested to see, especially as we wait to see if Tyon Grant-Foster gets a waiver from Gonzaga, which has not happened, or from the NCAA, which has not happened yet. I think Grant Foster is going to take some scoring away from Graham potentially. But if he's not in the picture, then they're going to really need Graham to score a whole bunch of points for this team. Looking around, I think we're on a little bit of a big man run right now. So I think I'm going to break that up by taking a guard here, a guard that was an All-American last year and a guard that transferred to a team that has done a lot of really good things with smaller guards the last half decade or so. That would be PJ Haggerty, transferring to Kansas State to go play for Jerome Tang. Yeah, it just feels like, I mean, Haggerty is a guy who, he scored 20 plus, 21 plus points per game last year at Memphis. And that Memphis team was good. I mean, they won 29 games. They had a lot of talent on the roster, but that team was pretty uniquely set up to let PJ Haggerty just score a whole bunch of points. Like, the Tyrese Hunter and some of the other guards on that roster were more defensive focused. And I think it just worked out really well. But again, while Haggerty could have stayed at Memphis and probably had a similar role, he ends up going to a program in Kansas State that has done, look what they've done with some of their smaller guards. Marquise Noel a few years ago. They had Tyler Perry a few years ago as well. Like, they have had a lot of success. Doug McDaniel, who is now at Memphis. And Haggerty's a guy that, he's limited in how overall impactful he can be for a team, but he is somebody who is excellent at scoring the basketball. And if Kansas State is decent, if they're decent at all this year, top 7-8 in the Big 12 in the NCAA tournament, and Haggerty's averaging 20 a game, which I think is very possible, I think he ends up in this conversation. I'd be fairly surprised if he's a first teamer, but I also feel like he's pretty safe to at least be a third teamer. And since we're getting towards the end of the draft, I figure I might as well take a guy that I feel there's a decent amount of security around.
I like the play. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, you and I did rank the players that'll score a lot of points. Mm-hmm. And I was flabbergasted he was not above 18 projected because Kansas State likes the guard rock, and this is a guy who does not like to pass. Mm-hmm. He's going to score, and he's going to get you 2.5 assists maximum. So it's going to be like 22 and 2. But that 22 matters. And so I think that's a good pick.
Well, Leif and I each have one more pick. We're going to do that, and then we're going to talk about some of our honorable mentions coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, college football is back, and I could not be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there is nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the people. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and just in a couple of taps, I saw some amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games as low as $25. It's faster, it's cheaper, it's easier, and less stressful than any other way that I have bought tickets. Big one here in Houston. Deion Sanders and Colorado coming out to play the Houston Cougars this Friday. Game Time has tickets for just $65, plus their super deal has $103 tickets in section 133 right near the field. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, folks, closing out the show, Leif and I each have one more pick to complete our rosters here for projecting All-Americans. As a reminder, each pick we make here, we're hoping to get points for them making an All-American team at the end of the season. Whoever gets the player of the year will get 5 points. If your player is on the first team, you get 4 points. Second team, 3 points. Third team, 2 points. Honorable mention, you get 1 point as well. So far, the rosters, Leif went with the trio of star freshmen, Darryn Peterson, Cam Boozer, and AJ Dybansa. He then also took Trey Kaufman-Wren and Graham Ike. I have gone with Braden Smith from Purdue, JT Toppin at Texas Tech, as well as Otega Owe from Kentucky, Zuby Ejiofor at St. John's, and most recently PJ Haggerty at Kansas State. Each of us have one more pick. Leif, you're up for your final pick here in the college basketball All-American draft.
I'm going to go with Yaxel Landeberg. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm doing that is because he'll have the ball a lot, and as a team with expectations to it, I'm a little lower on them. As I talked with Isaac about it on a recent episode, I'm not as high on Michigan as many, but he will have the ball a lot. He's already proven he can score 18 and 8 at the Division I level. Can he do it at the Big Ten? Who knows? But Danny Wolf had the exact same questions going to Michigan, and they gave him the ball even more than we anticipated, and he was great. So I think Yax will have a chance to have the ball and put up prolific stats. I think that there's a couple players that have the same kind of archetype of, hey, this guy's going to a new place, should have the keys, but how's that transition going to be? And I think he's the safest projection of that type.
I agree. And I think that Yaxel's a great pick here, and he would have been my last pick if you did not take him. Although it would have been agonizing because there's a couple of players here that I really want. But Yaxel is a very, very safe pick. Again, I think there is a little bit of concern of like, yeah, what does this look like at a different level? But Michigan was so, I mean, we saw what Danny Wolf did, and they're not the same player. I'm not trying to say that, but like Danny Wolf, the transition from the Ivy League to the Big Ten did not seem like a problem for him. And I don't think that Yaxel will run into a bunch of issues. But I think I'm going to go with one of the players that you were alluding to, talking about other players who are transferring up, who there's some questions about how that looks for them. But it feels wrong if we don't finish this draft with one of us taking Bennett Sturtz. So I feel like I think he's the right pick here. It's a little agonizing for me because there's a few guys I really wanted, but Bennett Sturtz is somebody who, you know, he was so productive last year at Drake for Coach Ben McCollum. Now Ben McCollum takes over at Iowa. Bennett Sturtz, he's going to have the keys. He's going to have the opportunity to put up big numbers, big scoring numbers, big passing numbers for a coach that he's very familiar with. I don't really project Sturtz's to really struggle with a higher level of competition. I don't know that he's necessarily going to put up like 20 a game or anything like that, but his game, I think, is going to translate well to the Big Ten, and I think translate well enough that Iowa doesn't need to be a top 5 team in the Big Ten for Sturtz to be in the All-American conversation. I do have a little bit of concern of like if Iowa's 11th in the Big Ten and just, you know, a game or two ahead of 500, like what's numbers does Sturtz have to put up on a mediocre team to be in this conversation? And that's the same struggle I might have with PJ Haggerty too. Two guys who I think are going to put up really good numbers, but are they going to put up numbers for teams that are just mediocre? It's part of the reason I avoided Josh Hubbard, by the way, at Mississippi State, who I think is going to do similar things. But Sturtz has the benefit of having a lot of kind of momentum around him. His name is recognizable by fans who watched the game last year and watched him in the NCAA tournament. And I think that kind of narrative might help him a little bit more than some of these other guys. But man, there was a lot of good players that we weren't able to pick here, but Bennett Sturtz feels like a safe final pick for me.
I like Sturtz. I was the biggest Ben McCollum to Indiana believer in the world. I still can't believe it happened. If McCollum and Sturtz went to Indiana, he'd be right there with Braden Smith as the favorite. Like I really believe that, and that rivalry would be awesome. So side note there, but I've got another Big Ten guy as an honorable mention. I'm going to go with Andrei Stojakovic. Because I think he might lead the Big Ten in scoring. And that usually is a good indicator. I mean, there's another guy like Brooks Barnheiser who could really score the ball, but I just don't think they'll be good enough. I think Illinois has got a chance to be a top 6-7 seed in the tournament, and he'll score 21, 22 a game, in which case that's a good ticket to be an All-American. Andre's a guy who I watched very closely while he was at Stanford, and he was a little bit streaky. He went to Cal, which hurt my heart, but he was pretty good there. And I think he'll be even better at Illinois because they give the reins to their lead guards. Like you saw it with Yakachonis, you saw it with Damask, you saw it with Shannon, and I think he'll be the next in line for that.
Yeah, currently Stojakovic, this just happened like a day or two ago, is dealing with a little bit of an injury. We're not sure the extent of it at this point. Obviously, health permitting for Stojakovic, I fully agree. I think he's a phenomenal pick here. A couple other guys that stood out to me, I'm just not sure if UCLA's offense is going to be dynamic enough for Donovan Dent to put up the numbers that might be necessary for him to be in this conversation. But goodness, is Donovan Dent a talented player? And I think that he is a decent fit for UCLA. I'm just, their offense is slow enough pace that I'm not quite sure what that'll look like for him. I hesitated really hard, but I thought Sturtz was a slightly safer pick, but I wanted to shout out Donovan Dent here. And then some of those smaller guards in the SEC that we've talked about a handful of times, LeBaron Philon, Todd Pettiford, even Boogie Fland and Xavion Lee. I think those guys are all very talented. I think probably for me, Pettiford is the one that I would most likely pick out of that group because I think the opportunity to score 18 plus points per game for a good Auburn team is definitely there. But I wasn't quite like if we'd had 10 players each, I think that those guys probably get picked, but they just missed the cut for me.
I got two guards that I would take over all those guys actually. So, well, maybe not Dent, but the SEC guards, I should say. One is Christian Anderson because I love Christian Anderson. I tweeted something while he was playing for Germany 2 years ago. I said, if this guy goes to Texas Tech, maybe they'll be pretty good next year. I didn't realize how good he'd be. I didn't realize how good Texas Tech would be, even though we did a show. And it's like, what's the team that you're really looking forward to watching that you think's underrated right now is Texas Tech. Like I still undersold them, and I felt like I was among the highest on them. And Christian Anderson was a huge reason why. This year, I expect both of them to be first team all conference in the Big 12 like that. He and Toppin, that is. And I'm very confident in that. And then the other guard I think we have neglected to mention would be Mikel Brown. I don't feel as confident in this one, but if Louisville's as good as many think, I think he's got to be their best player, or at least like the number one on the scouting report. Like you could look at it and you say, oh yeah, Ryan Conwell's really good, but Ryan Conwell's a known commodity, right? Like he's going to score 15, 16, he's going to shoot it well, he's going to be a good player. But like you need the number one option to support Conwell, McNeely's shooting. You need his creation, his shooting, his speed. So I think if Louisville's as good as some people believe they can be, that he'll be the catalyst for it, and therefore that's like 17 points and a couple assists, and that's usually something pretty good if you're a top 10 team.
Last player I'm going to mention before we wrap out of here. I made a pretty big list before we started. We've actually talked about every player on this list except one, and that's Milos Uzan. And I think he certainly deserves a mention here just by virtue of being likely the best player on a Houston team that could end up being a top 3 team in all of college basketball. I think that Houston's going to, spread the love a little bit with their freshman guard, with Harwell and Flemings, and with Chris Senack in the front court. And I think that Uzan's numbers may not be like super extravagant necessarily, but he's a really, really good player. And I think if Houston ends up, there's a reasonable chance Houston is the best or second best team in college basketball, and that means they'll have at least somebody on the All-American teams, and the likely candidate in my mind is Milos Uzan. Folks, that's going to wrap it up for us today. This is so much fun. I'm really looking forward to the end of the year. I'm looking forward to the start of the year, but I'm also looking forward to getting a chance to recap this and see which of these players we were right on, which of these players we were maybe horribly off on, and kind of how that ends up shaping up this upcoming season. Folks, thanks again for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. We'll be back. We got some team previews coming later this week. And then Isaac and I'll be back with another conference preview for you all on Friday as well. As always, and especially today, since we didn't pick him, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to Donovan Dent and the Mick Bruins. And until next time, peace out.